Women have played an important role in the history of our nation. The American Revolution is, of course, no exception to this. Let us take a few moments to look at the lives, or at least some of the contributions, of some women who were part of the Revolutionary War itself. Now, while the women who were chosen for this particular segment, were not necessarily the only ones there, they at least give us a portrait. For it must be remembered that when it came to their contributions, there were mothers, daughters, wives, aunts, nieces, granddaughters, all of whom had to give a sacrifice in order to ensure our freedoms for this country. When we think of the American Revolution, though, perhaps no woman should begin this list other than Martha Washington, the wife of George Washington. For her, we think of her as being the very first of First Ladies, and she certainly was an example to many other women throughout the country during the Revolution. She supported the army through sewing circles and gathering supplies. In addition to this, during winter quarters, she would travel to wherever the army was encamped and spent every winter with General Washington during the war years. In addition to this, she would provide comfort to soldiers and was always seen as an indispensable nurse. She would emerge from the war as a selfless, courageous, and patriotic American, and was described by one onlooker as, quote, "I never in my life knew a woman so busy from early morning until late at night as was Lady Washington, providing comforts for the sick soldiers." An example truly to behold. The second revolutionary woman to consider is Abigail Adams, who was a firm advocate for the equality of women during the American Revolution. At the beginning of the Second Continental Congress, she would advocate to her husband, John Adams, that the creation of a government in what would be formerly the American colonies and eventually the United States should give legal status of women being equal to that of men. In addition to this, while her husband was busy dealing with the creation of a rebel government in hopes of creating an independent government, she maintained the family home in Braintree and said herself, quote, "I hope in time to have the reputation of being as good a farmist as my partner has of being a good statesman." Unofficially, though, she would also serve as an advisor to her husband, and the letters between the two show that John Adams often sought her counsel on many issues, not just during the Revolution itself, but also well into his political career, even all the way through the presidency. A third woman to consider is Lucy Knox. For her, she's oftentimes thought to have been rather aloof. However, the reality is she probably gave up a bit more than people realized. She gave up her entire family for starters, who were all loyalists, especially after she had married Henry Knox, who would go on to serve as one of Washington's most trusted generals. She was a kind and generous woman, never hesitating to share food that she and her husband had to starving men and giving aid to the sick and injured. Interestingly enough, her efforts in trying to help create a new nation were so profound that until the year 1794, neither she nor her husband ever had a permanent residence to call their own. The final woman to consider is one known simply in history as Molly Pitcher. However, Molly Pitcher isn't just a single person. Rather, it is a nickname given to women who fought during the American Revolution. And there is no shortage of notable women. The most likely individual who donned this nickname is a woman by the name of Mary Ludwig Hayes, who was the wife of an artilleryman, William Hayes. During the Battle of Monmouth, he was killed, and she would take his place at the cannons. Because of her actions, George Washington personally commended her. A second person who also was the wife of an artilleryman was Margaret Corbin. Her husband John was inside of Fort Washington, and during the defense of the fort he was killed, and she would continue fighting his place at the cannons. During the battle she was wounded, and in 1779 she was awarded an annual pension of $50 by the state of Pennsylvania. A third woman who earned the nickname of Molly Pitcher was Deborah Sampson, who had disguised herself as a man. She received the nickname of Molly, though, due to her smooth complexion and high-pitched voice. However, no one ever realized that she was actually a woman, or at least no one publicly admitted as much.